Thank you very much. Thank you, Chaplain Murphy, for introducing me so generously. Thank you, Dr. Taylor, and your associates here for inviting me to participate in this ceremony, this meeting today. I look forward to it, and I have looked to it because of my long-standing interest in this institution. I've not come here today to do a lot of reminiscing, but I want to do a little bit. I am so pleased to be here for this particular program where we have come together to honor the memory of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Nowhere in America has the impact and influence of his life been more directly felt than here in Mississippi. And this arguably the most segregated and racially discriminatory state in America at one time, all of us, black and white together, can celebrate today for the changes that have taken place as a result of the inspiring leadership of Dr. King. We owe so much to him, but not just to him. To the countless and nameless other men and women, some of whom I see in front of me here today, who struggled in the face of all manner of threats and terror to make this a more just and fairer country. And it has not just been African Americans who have been the beneficiaries of these changes. I said to my friend Mrs. Merle Evers one time when we had a luncheon for her at the governor's mansion, I said, Ms. Evers, we white folks owe as much to you and your martyred husband as black folks do, because he freed us too. We were all prisoners of a system that had kept us all in bondage. I can remember those days. I do so, I must confess to you today, I do so with a lot of personal remorse and pain, as I recall what life was like in Mississippi when I returned from World War II in 1946. As a 24-year-old law student, I was elected to the legislature the following year, 1947. I had come back from a largely segregated military to a totally segregated state. By luck or fate or providence or whatever, however we might want to describe it, I had been assigned during my military service in World War II as a white officer to one of the only two integrated infantry regiments in the whole army. Out of that experience, I came to realize for the first time, really for the first time, how terrible and how wrong racial segregation was. Well, when I got back to Mississippi after the war, I also came to understand how difficult it was going to be to change. Let me share with you one of my earliest experiences as a state legislator in 1948. A colleague of mine and I, who was also a returning war veteran, took the opportunity one day to drive down to Alcorn A&M College. Neither one of us had ever been there, and we said, you know, that's a state institution. Let's drive down and just see what it's like down there. Well, we drove down, and after going a winding road out to the college campus in the backwoods of southwest Mississippi, we found Oklahoma A&M College. And we called on the president of that institution, two young white legislators. Dr. Pipes was the president of Oklahoma at that time. He came out and greeted us warmly and invited us to his office, and we sat there and talked with him for an hour or more. And as we got ready to leave, he said, "Gentlemen, we don't have many white legislators come down here to see us, and I appreciate you coming. But he said, when you get back to Jackson, please explain to them how hard it is for me to be the president of one of the state colleges." He said, for example, when I go into Fort Gibbs to register to vote, and I show them my credentials, a PhD from the University of Michigan, and they tell me I'm not qualified to vote in Mississippi. I said, I have a hard time coming back to this campus and convincing these young students down here that I'm capable of the leadership that they're looking for. That made such an impression on me that from that day on, I said, as a public official, I'm going to do whatever I can to try to make some changes in Mississippi. But as I just said, I didn't realize how hard that would be. But during that same session of the legislature in 1948, really, I had an equally meaningful experience. The proposal to create a 4-year medical school in Mississippi was proposed. I signed the bill with one of the co-authors of it. But again, the issue of race raised its ugly head. That bill was defeated by the fiscally conservative members of the legislature, but it wasn't just about money. The real concern was that if we established this 4-year medical school and hospital in Jackson, it would surely lead to faculty and student and patient integration. Some of us were appalled by those attitudes that were expressed by some of our colleagues. And so in the next 2 years, we worked to overcome some of that opposition. Now, why do I bring that up here on the campus of this institution? I do so because it foretells the vital role that this medical school has played from the very beginning of its existence to helping create a climate in Mississippi where qualities like fairness and inclusion and compassion are able to overcome the naysayers and the do-nothings and the bitter end segregations. 2 years later, 1950, the next session of the legislature, our time finally came. Our forces in support of the new medical school and hospital were able to prevail over the old guard that included some of the most powerful politicians in the state, including the Speaker of the House of Representatives. In the 3-hour-long debate on the House floor, the clinching and climactic speech came from Representative Blaine Eaton of rural Smith County. His words, I believe, are worth repeating today as we remind ourselves of our continuing responsibilities to support this medical center and, for that matter, our system of public education in Mississippi. In answer to those who said we couldn't afford a 4-year medical school, and with reference to the ever-present issue of race, which was used by the opponents against the school, this is what my colleague, Representative Blaine Eaton, said on that day in March, 64 years ago. I don't care if it costs $5 million to save the life of one child in Mississippi. Some people can't help it because their papa or mama didn't inherit a plantation. I don't care whether they're white or black. They're just as much citizens as you are. You can't put a price on their heads. If you do, you have forgotten all the good that was born in you. That was an inspiring speech for me there on the floor of the Mississippi House of Representatives way back there in 1950. And it was one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life as a legislator to see that bill enacted into law. This institution, this medical school, came into being in that spirit of fairness and equity and justice that was expressed in the speech of Representative Blaney. That long ago legislative victory laid the basis for the role that this medical center has played ever since, in being the one public institution in our state that even in those benighted times provided a beacon of enlightenment that put service to humanity above racial bias and prejudice. Under the leadership of some of those early medical statesmen with names like Guyton and Pancratz and Brown and Marston and Hardy and Bauer and Nelson and Connolly, and now there were the successors, Dr. Dan Jones and Dr. Jimmy Keaton. The University of Mississippi Medical Center has been the most dynamic force among all of the public institutions in this state in overcoming racial injustice and discrimination. I need not remind you that at the same time that this institution was quietly breaking down racial barriers, it was also breaking incredible medical barriers, such as conducting the first heart transplant and bringing favorable international attention to our state. So this institution, and I'm so pleased to visit today, can take great pride not only for its leadership in the medical field, but for what it has done to overcome our shameful record on race. This is your hard-earned and well-deserved heritage that makes us all proud. And that's why it is so appropriate that we have a celebration like this one today. A lot of politicians like me have timidly tried to talk in years gone by. But you have done the heavy lifting as you have worked to make good things happen in Mississippi. And now that we have come through those many difficult years, what can I say this morning that addresses where we are now and what I think we must do now? At the risk of seeming presumptuous, let me make a few observations. In spite of all the progress that we've made in the last few decades, the issue of race remains the most difficult and intractable problem that our state and our region and our nation faces. Why is this so? It is because we still have not come to terms with the deep-seated, little understood, and usually repressed feelings that are derived from our different backgrounds. The old stereotypes die hard. Let's face this fact. All of us are the products of our life experiences and the times and conditions in which we were raised. I was raised as a segregationist. That's all I knew. For many, those life experiences have included discrimination and exclusion and bad memories. But for others, those experiences have been where privilege and acceptance have been taken for granted. I have a lot of well-meaning white friends who cannot be characterized as racist, but who simply feel that it is unnecessary or even counterproductive to try to do anything to resolve these differences. They argue that it is just a waste of time because there isn't much we can do and that it's just better to let things alone. The only problem with that is it doesn't work that way. Our society is rapidly becoming more diverse, more complicated racially, more subject to misunderstanding and mistrust, more caught up in white flight and resegregation. Unless we come together to work at eliminating or at least reducing the remaining areas of racial tension and misunderstanding, our state, our region, our country are not going to be as good for our children and our grandchildren, those 5 little grandchildren of mine, one of whom was a graduate of this institution, incidentally. They're not going to be as good for them to live in as they ought to be. Given the fabulous natural wealth and advanced social and educational institutions that we have, that would be a tragedy indeed if we let divisions over race diminish the quality of our lives, as it has too often in the past. I believe very deeply that our ability to exist as a responsible and unified society in the future will depend on how well we eliminate the stratification of our citizenry based on race. A beginning point in this process may be a simple recognition that we do not and probably cannot see a great many issues from the same perspective. How far we think we have come in race relations depends largely on where we stand. Most white folks think that we've come further than most black people think we have. But what we can agree on is the proposition that we must provide an opportunity to every person, regardless of race or class, to secure a competitive education and to be able to compete on a level playing field. And that racism, in whatever form it is expressed, whether by speech or act, must be considered outside the bounds of acceptable conduct in our society. But having said that, let me also say that the cause of improved race relations is not served by using the issue of race as an excuse for not going to school, for not getting an education, or not acting responsibly. Nothing is so self-defeating as falling into the trap of playing the victim's role. All of this is a matter of trying to be honest with ourselves and with each other. It is a matter of developing a sense of trust based on everybody, black and white together, trying to start from the same place. Now, for us white folks, it must begin with an acknowledgement of our complicity in the creating and supporting of an inhumane and indefensible system based on enslaving and exploiting people of a different race. For black people, it means being able to forgive, even while still remembering the horrors of the past. But there has to come a time in the lives of all of us when we must recognize that we are all in this together. When we must move past the old divisions of race and recognize our common interests and our common humanity. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen automatically. It will happen only as enough of us, black and white, work to make it happen. The liberation of all of us from our old biases and prejudices will finally enable us to ensure that our children, those grandchildren of mine, 2 of those great-grandchildren of mine, my wife and mine, will inherit a better place to live than has existed before. This is the kind of responsible citizenship that we must embrace. And I must say today I was so heartened by the vote on that bond issue yesterday. It seems to me that that was a statement of unity that is going to serve our city well in the future, not just in delivering services, but in relating to each other. That's the kind of responsible citizenship that we must embrace. In doing things that may not immediately and directly benefit us, but that will create for those who come after us the opportunity for a more fulfilling and productive life. And so that's why I'm so glad to be here today, to share the things that are going on, the initiatives that are going on here on this campus, that are being undertaken to emphasize your recognition of the work on racial reconciliation that must be done. I know the relationship that you've established with other institutions, Tougaloo and Jackson State and Alcorn and my alma mater, Ole Miss, where I'm pleased to be associated with the Winter Institute for Racial Reconciliation up there, and I hope that you all will work with those folks up there. This is the work. This is the Lord's work. This is the Lord's work. To see to it that we create a society where all of us, regardless of what we look like, where we come from, what we do, what club we belong to, where we live, all of us understand our common humanity. Understand that we must respect each other. We must come to know each other, that we must come to share the burdens together, and also enjoy the results together. I believe the next generation of people who live in this part of the country are going to have the greatest opportunities that anybody ever had of capitalizing on the experiences of our dark past, to make sure that we don't repeat those mistakes again, and understand that there is value. Understand that there is value in every single human being. And when we come to that point, we're going to have a place for everybody that's going to have a good life. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for letting me share this.